It's game day for the Cougars, and it's time to get you ready for kickoff.
Deep one here, trying to get JoJo Phillips. How about a big touchdown for BYU? Jake Retzloff talking about the expectations for this team. He said nobody's got them except us. He said 4.5. That's the win total projection for us. That's ridiculous. As he fires over the middle, another touchdown pass. Matava Tase hauls it in for 6 more.
Rhett Lashley, he's an amazing coach. He knows how to run an offense, call a game, and run a program. And so I think he's one of the best coaches in college football. He's done a great job with that program. It's going to be tough for us to go in there and then play against them, but we have to get some things fixed in order for us to be at our best. I know they have a really explosive team and our favorite in this game. So, this is an opportunity for our guys to get in there and figure out ways to get better and improve.
You can already tell they're much improved from a year ago. Really explosive on offense, can run it and throw it. Quarterback's playing great. And defensively, they're big up front. They got a really good pass rusher off the edge, and I think their linebackers are much improved from a year ago.
Clean up the little things, the little mistakes that aren't amplified against a team like that, and that will be amplified against an ACC opponent. And I know every position has their little things that they need to improve on, and communication and stuff like that. In the game, everything's a little faster, and so getting used to that is definitely a big deal, and something that I think will be better in week 2 for us.
Very good defense, very athletic. They know what they're doing. They're really good at their system. Excellent team. I mean, it's a big step up from what we had to deal with last week, and we got a big challenge on our hands.
All the insight and analysis you need to get you ready for another edition of Cougar football. This is the Cougar Pregame Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Saturday morning cartoons is what this reminds me of.
Oh, Football Friday is converted into an extension of the Cougar Pregame Show, which, of course, because it's a Friday.
Exactly.
Because
Daffy Duck's coming around.
Oh, my gosh. It's not that far off. You're right. Stevenson, Sylvester, of course, with us here as we bring you the Cougar Pregame Show right here. JJ, of course, myself, Alex Curie, and then, of course, Riley Nelson, former BYU quarterback. So there's a lot going on here, and because it is a game day, and because we're an hour before kickoff, it is our we're going to be doing BYU preview stuff anyway. Okay, so this works out. This works out, Sly. The fact that it's branded as the Cougar Pregame Show.
I don't like it.
You don't like the direction that the show's gone?
We changed the title.
Listen, you get look. The Utes get a nice premiere 5 o'clock.
Yeah, you get the Utes
as they should.
So you're going to be in a good spot.
As they should.
All right off the bat, you heard a couple things in there. Jake Retzlaff talking about what this team did on offense. One, I guess. Were you surprised? We all assumed it was going to be Jake Retzlaff, right? I mean, that was kind of the badly kept secret. I think that it ended up seeking out. It was not a very well kept secret, but by the way, our program brought to you by G2G Bars. All natural ingredients and no preservatives make the G2G Bar a perfect protein bar for you. Check it out. Costco, Holiday Oil, Maverick, Associated Foods. And this hour also brought to you by the folks at the Doug Smith dealerships in American Fork and Spanish Fork. Nobody knows service like Doug Smith knows cars in American Fork and Spanish Fork. All right, that stuff's out of the way, and we're back on to what this BYU team. Let's start at first with what they did last week. Riley, what was your impression, I guess, of watching Jake Retzlaff getting that start? BYU putting up 527 yards of offense. They didn't even eclipse the 400-yard mark, even against an FCS opponent and a newly minted FBS team in Sam Houston State last year. So your impressions of week 1, even though, some people might be holding their judgment totally until you get a few games under your belt.
It's clear to me, and I said in the last week's show I'm not a fan of the FCS games, but if you're going to do it, then, let's do it. It was clear to me that was the plan coming out from Coach Sitake to Coach Roderick to even Coach Hill is if we're going to play, let's play. You talked about, and Slides talked about putting stuff on tape, but I think Roderick wasn't scared about putting some of those trick plays because those are going to be in his game plan. I feel like if
it's his personality.
Yeah, I was going to say if he has one critique of himself over his tenure as offensive coordinator, it's been when he's been like, you know what, we should rein that in. I think that's part of who he is. I think that energizes him during the game week prep. It also energizes his staff. It fosters creativity. It fosters excitement and energy. And so that was the plan out there, and it gave confidence to a guy. I mean, there's nothing better than for a guy who's spent the whole entire offseason mired in controversy and doubt and people people sharing opinions on either for or against to come out and light up the stat sheet. So that looked like it was clear from the get-go. I think that came from the head coach down. Roderick executed on the game plan, and then, meaning put the game plan into implementation, and then Retzlaff executed on it. So I think it was good all around.
Riley, when you're the quarterback at BYU and you're having success and you're winning, you're like the most popular guy in town. And when things aren't going well, it can get pretty rough, right? So you've been in those shoes. What do you imagine it was like for Jake Retzlaff, comparing it to your own experience, the ups and downs, the highs and lows? Because it didn't start off great for him here. And 0-4, it was rough. A lot of people made some judgments about him. All this, that's what we saw. That's what was on tape. How do you think it was for him in the offseason? Because he's obviously handled it the right way, at least based on what we saw in Game 1, to be able to overcome a lot of that negativity and to improve and get better and win that job.
I hope it kept his collar hot, throughout I think it was an overall good thing. Yeah. Football is a game where you can't, you can be a good sport, but you gotta have an edge to you. And I feel like as long as he didn't start feeling sorry for himself, which I don't think there were any indications that he did, I think it probably made him better, and it probably fueled him. And we saw some of that pent up come out next week, but. This is going to be the first test. I know that it's their first opportunity in P4, but now they are a P4 opponent, and the ACC, as crazy as that sounds, and you went 0-4 in your starts against your own conference opponents, which has been your only exposure against P4. So, all right, you proved you can actually play, right? Meaning you came out and did what you were supposed to do against an FCS. Now prove what you're really hired to do, and that's go out and get P4 wins.
It's an interesting thing, too, because, the part of, and you brought it up too, where you go, look, we base so much of how the team is going to perform this year off of last year, right? You just go, oh, last year this happened. And people, for sure, if that's the case, they did it with Jake Retzlaff, where they go, well, it's hard to divorce yourself from the feelings that he created of a pick six at the end of the –
I'm guilty of it.
I know.
That's all you have. That's all you had to evaluate.
Hand the ball off. You're on the one.
Yeah. Right? Was it – it's fair.
Hey, don't say that to a Seahawks fan. I was going to say, don't do that. Don't do that. So – but, yeah, I mean, Sly, you tell me. I mean, when somebody goes, here's how you are, and then the next year comes around, and you hear all that stuff in the offseason. You know what kind of –
Well, except for Utah, right? We had all we had going on last year at Utah. Utah can literally change the whole narrative in the whole offseason. We were getting Dorian Zinger. We were getting all these assets in the offseason. So,
but the hope was Cam Rising's back. We don't have to think about the whole quarterback situation, right?
So situations like that. But, literally, Retzlaff's last year, I think he was at a disadvantage, honestly, with what he had to play against, playing against Keaton Slovis. He didn't get a fair shake at the whole deal. They was doing quarterback battles all throughout the year. And so finally at the end of the season, when they're just give it to him, he started to show a little light in the bottle there. And so this year, I think he's got more grasp of the system with other quarterbacks who didn't have his type of experience in the system. He kind of had a leg up, and he's actually making it known. Having 350 yards last week, I think was great to get your feet wet. And yeah, as we said, this is where, as Riley said, this is where it actually matters, right? Start getting these P4 wins so people can have confidence in your football team.
A couple of notes on this game. Hey, Jeremy, do you have off the top of your head what the line is on this game? Not that
Why do you assume that?
No, listen. I'm just wondering.
We need the help of a degenerate.
Has it moved? I know it's still double digits, but has it moved?
Give me 1 second.
One way or the other. It was around that 14 points.
Last 12.5.
It was 2 days ago. It was 10.5.
Okay, it's moved up. I think it's 13 as of today. I know we have 12.5.
So it's moving the other direction.
It is. It moved up even that.
That oil money is coming in heavy on the Stangs. On the ponies, they call them.
I picked SMU to win.
Hats on the sidelines for this one.
Yeah, listen. I picked SMU to win this game before the season. Again, based on what we saw last year, we have nothing else to go on.
Riley brought it
Riley's
up.
bringing up. You're bringing up some great points. Like who they beat last year was nothing special. They really struggled against Nevada. What I saw BYU week 1, yes, it was against an FCS opponent, but there was a lot to like.
You're right.
I can still say, SMU's at home. I love the quarterback. The tight end's a star. The defense is really good. But on paper, this should not be a 10.5 or a 13.5 spread.
If you just Google a team and schedule results on Google, it allows you to scroll back, and I kept scrolling back.
Yep.
So their I scrolled all the way back to 2018. 1 P5 win. They beat their crosstown rival TCU. by 7 in the year that TCU went 2-10 and finished 12th in the Big 12.
And what's interesting too is
that's their one P5 win in the last 5 years.
You want to hear a worse one too? Because that game was actually in Fort Worth. They haven't won a Power 4 game against an opponent at home since 2010. So they haven't won. So that's 14 years of not winning a game at home against a Power 5.
Yeah.
And look, and I'm telling you, a lot of it is based off of the fact that, and I don't know, I've heard this way too much this week. People are like, yeah, but Nevada's gotten way better this year, Bob. I'm like, really? Have they?
They shouldn't show it in the fourth quarter of that game when they showed complete ineptitude.
Right.
Penalties, 3 and outs. I watched that because it was week 0. There was nothing else on, and you watch that game. It's in Reno, and I was just baffled as that game was coming to a close.
The Muffet catch at the one was just like, oh, my gosh.
SMU did not win that football game. Nevada lost it.
Agreed.
And so, I don't know. But the betting lines are the betting. Look, BYU also didn't prove anything to you either. So, this is almost a restart. I know it's SMU's third game because they played the week 0 and week 1, and it's only BYU's 2. But this is really week 1 of real football for both of these teams. So truly anything can happen. I have my feelings and I have my judgments on what I've seen of each of these teams of the small sample size. But the reality is it's very intriguing. And in 40 minutes, we're going to start finding out what each team is really made of.
I'll say this. This is a massive opportunity tonight for BYU. We talk about the disrespect of the line. A lot of people picking SMU. They can, if they go down there and really, really have some great success, not just win, but win convincingly, it's going to change a lot of minds around the country, not just around here, about who BYU is and what they can do this year. They will earn a lot of respect by going down there and winning tonight if they can do it.
And one of the things I want to see really quick, I'll give you a slide.
What was that noise?
No, last thing I'll say, and maybe last thing, maybe not, but they do have legit speed. I wasn't impressed with the execution of the offense, but those wide receivers are the types of wide receivers that you're going to find throughout the Big 12 that caused BYU problems last year, and they have perennially caused BYU problems. I want to see my biggest thing coming into this season, as much attention and air as the quarterback battle sucked up. I wanted to see if Jay Hill's defense will take not a step, a leap from year 1 to year 2. Early indications are promising, but I think there's going to be a real test, more so of the secondary, and in an offense that tends to get the ball out quick, a lot of lateral throws. Can that pass rush stay engaged and take advantage of opportunities to make the quarterback's life hard? Okay, slide with the
what was it?
You said put the nation on notice. I don't know about that because they
could
could literally
notice. I said people will notice.
BYU Nation. Maybe that's
okay. That's different. That's different.
That are down hope,
on
BYU.
The preseason hope. We're there.
But you know how it is too.
SMU's a team that a lot of people are on this year.
Yes.
But we just talked
if
about
BYU
their
goes down there and wins,
competition in the last decade.
But they can't. But
right. That's all fair.
But they had in front of them exactly what their schedule was, which is light every year.
Yeah, the AAC. And so, you have to do what you got to do.
But they've won 11 games, 2 out of the last 3 years.
Can I continue to pile on though? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Also, I'm trying to think of an equivalent outside where it's like, guys, come on, let me into the party. No, man, no, we're not inviting you. Come on, I'll pay for everybody's cover charges, and I'll bring the booze. The only way they got into the ACC was we won't take a share. We'll pay for ourselves.
Yeah, hey, Jeremy, sorry, get that drop of Riley saying, "I'll bring the booze." It will be played right next to Sly's comments about BYU basketball.
That's the only way I want to hear it.
But to that point is all right, 11 in the last 2 years, but the reality is they're only in the ACC because they're Dallas is a nice recruiting market in the ACC. We don't have a foothold in Texas. Yeah. Sure, SMU, you can come in, but you're a second-class citizen.
Yeah, and I think it was Billy Embody, who we had on yesterday, who covers SMU, was like,
he was great.
He goes, hey, yeah, people are saying that, but the reality is they're not taking $0. What they're taking is this really minor cut, which is still doubling what they were getting in the AAC.
That's what's crazy about the
money. They go from $7 million. They go $7 million a year in their TV rights deal to they get I think it's 14 or 15, something like that. So they still get better money than they did. But yeah,
they get they get their share of the additional money, but they don't get bought in the existing pie. I think is how it worked out.
And is it 12 or 15? It's 10 or 15 years, something really stupid.
Yeah.
They were able to. It's back. You could buy a house like 5 years ago where the seller was like, just take everything, please. Just like, I'll pay the closing costs. I'll do all the things you can. That was
take it off my hands.
Right. It's just what the market bore at that point for the ACC, who was like, well, I don't know, I guess we'll take Stanford.
Cal.
We'll take Cal.
Would you rather be SMU right now or Washington State and Oregon State?
And that's a good point. I mean,
I think they did. They had to do it. They had to do whatever it took to get into that Power 4 status.
And to that point, Oregon State and Washington State are the clueless home seller who are like, we know what we have, okay? Like, we don't touch us with all this. But the reality is that BYU has gone through something interesting. When you brought that up about Jake Retzlaff and what he inherited, so to speak, which was them getting into the worst part of their schedule, already into a small losing streak. They end up losing the rest of the games, and it was obviously Jake Retzlaff wasn't the full problem on offense last year.
Yeah.
I mean, you ask Connor Pay, who's very, very quick to tell you that they were the problem. Their offensive line was the problem. By the way, you watched Kingsley Sumatai
last night. How about that?
Where was that guy? That just shows you a little bit of the dysfunction of kind of where that offensive line group was at last year, which was a mess. And so try to ask your guys. I mean, I think there's been a 180 on the attitude change, and certainly TJ Woods has helped with that. But they've asked a lot of guys like Connor Pay who are like, they're asking them to keep their dudes more accountable. I think it's going to be an interesting test tonight to see where you're at. I think it's a perfect step before you start getting into I would have loved to have seen the games flip-flopped. I would love to see Wyoming this week and then SMU next week, and then you start to get into conference play, because I think you're going to get a real test tonight that isn't a Big 12 test. It's certainly not a Big 12 test. And the ACC is what it is. I don't know where SMU's even at. I mean, Florida State is 0-2, and way out of the top 25. And Clemson's not very good. And, all the teams we thought were going to be good in the ACC have not been. And so it's an interesting time. Yeah, it's an interesting time in the ACC. It's not a strong conference, which is good for the Big 12, who are trying to get two teams in the playoff this year.
Miami might be back.
Gosh, crystal ball. I don't want to give him any credit.
Sorry, let's bring it.
Hate him.
Bring it away from
Cam Ward, but I like Cam Ward.
Bring it away from the Atlantic Coast back to BYU. The other thing is you talked about that, and I remember because I played against those Utah teams, and it was always frustrating. That was part of what contributed to the 9-game losing streak. Is like we always had to schedule Utah at the beginning. I would have loved to have caught Utah all those years on the back when they were making the transition from G5 to P5, because you don't have that depth yet, and you get decimated as the year goes on. So like if I'm Retzlaff over here, I'm like, yeah, well, now I'm playing with a full deck. Like, I got the last 4 years after we were beat up on a roster that hadn't built up to P5 depth yet. And granted, you can look at, well, he was playing or he was that, but they're nicked. They're nicked. He wasn't playing with the full complement. Now he gets to start from the very beginning with everybody's fresh and everybody's healthy and a real chance to prove himself. But he's got to keep it rolling again. You just can't light it up against FCS. Got to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to say about experience, too. Even the guys, I mean, you got Chase Roberts still, Cody Epps. You got all of these playmakers, Connor Pay. The week-to-week experience of knowing what your conference will hold is valuable, right? They didn't know that last year.
Yeah.
They do know that this year. So even in preparation in the offseason, they know what to expect week to week. And so, I think there's a lot of value in that in this team going out this year.
I knew you were a pro, Sly.
No, don't
I knew
you
were going to
dare.
be a pro about it.
Don't you
The final word on BYU, Stevenson, Sylvester.
Don't you dare.
Look, I knew in the end you were just going to be a team player and be a pro, and you're going to be able to break it down.
I'm a realist, okay?
I know. You know all these guys.
I'll have all of his gear package. It's in the mail. I already texted Jack Mooney down there.
Good, I need more firewood.
He does love the promise of BYU football.
We're going to take the break here. We've got more to go around the corner here. It is your Cougar Preview Show. By the way, Jake Hatch, who I host these pre- and post-game shows with, and he'll be on the post with us as well after BYU kicks off and plays this game against SMU tonight. You can catch that. He just texted and said, by the way, and I think, Riley, you had brought it up because you were like, what's Darius Lassiter's status? We'll bring that up in the next break. But also, injury-wise, no major injuries. Still avoiding the injuries, which is good. Knock on well, we don't have any here, but knock on wood, BYU fans, that the injuries
Riley will bring the booze.
That's right.
All right. We're going to take a break before we totally devolve. We'll leave that for the rest of the program. More to go. Your life moves fast. Quantum Fiber Internet is faster. Move up to tomorrow's speeds today. QuantumFiber.com. That's QuantumFiber.com. More to go right around the corner. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's a Friday, and we're talking football non-stop. All football, all the time. This is another edition of Football Friday with JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Yeah, this is his defense. I mean, I anticipate him returning to his role, his role as D coordinator and doing his part. But I don't know if he'll be on the field or if he'll be in the box. I heard the coaches start liking that posh life in the box a little bit too much. And maybe he's liking it up there. I don't know. But like I said after the game, it was nice just to hear his voice on the headphones and that we can kind of talk back and forth. It was a good setup. The defense performed well. I'm looking forward to getting Jay back with us full time.
Welcome on in, everybody. It is your Football Friday on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, and right now an extension of the Cougar pregame show. Join Hans and Scotty, by the way, since we're talking about preview shows, at Tim Daly Nissan, Southtown, next Wednesday from 1 to 3 for that Cougar preview show. It's there on 111th South-ish and Jordan Gateway there in South Jordan. So think Nissan, think Tim Daly, Southtown. All right, so let's chat a little bit more about this matchup here tonight between SMU and BYU. The offensive line, so first of all, some of the biggest changes that I think the average person doesn't know necessarily, and maybe this is something you could speak to, Sly, which is when a guy like Gary Anderson comes up and helps as an analyst, Sione Pua obviously has got his hands in this thing as a D-line coach at BYU. And you've got Jay Hill up there, obviously, and Kalani. This is a bunch of guys who know this, and they know this system. This is the system that they coached in for so long. What does the addition of a guy like Gary Anderson add to a team? Like it says analyst on the sheet, but I mean they brought him in to help out with that D line, which is a place on the opposite side of things last year. BYU's defense, the offensive line couldn't figure it out. The defensive line could not get any pressure, and we saw that change a little bit in week 1.
Well, it's the technicians, the technique part. On our Sunday night breakdowns, I would always talk about, I know this defense. I know what play they're doing. They're doing this wrong, right? And a guy like Gary Anderson is an extra set of eyes who can help you fix that, who's been a head coach. He's been a coordinator. He's been on winning teams. He's been to championship games. He gets that experience that'll let you know, okay, we need to practice on this because this is going to be a problem in the future. This is going to be something that other teams are going to try to exploit, and guys like Gary Anderson will do it, where he's not in that defensive coordinator role where he's having to call plays or being responsible for X, Y, Z. You just get that experimental eyes that is extremely helpful. I hate to say all of these Utah guys' names attached with BYU, but I mean, these guys are awesome. Right?
No, I know
I love Kalani, love Jay Hill. I hope he's doing a little better. I did text him the other day. He texted back. He's already trying to get back. He's psycho.
Can you believe how quickly that turned around? Because it went from man, he's going to be at home, he's going to watch the game,
to him on the sidelines,
and then it was like he's up in the booth, and then after the game he's in the locker room, all those.
He had a heart attack.
I know.
Yeah,
he had a completely blocked artery.
It's how that guy works, man. He's a
it's like he's a Chicago super fan or something.
My fifth heart attack, Bob.
Jeez.
No, man, but I think Gary Anderson, he'll bring that technique that you'll need week to week and what you need to prepare for and what's going to help you in the future, man. And so, I just remember this. It was after a game. We were actually headed back towards the airport when I was in Pittsburgh, and he calls me. Of course, he was watching the game. He's like, yo, I'm moving over to more of an odd front. It looks a lot like your 3-4. Like, what is what is this? How does this work? And so he's really in tune with the details and why things work the way they work. It's the same thing like in the league. Everybody tried to run the fire zone defense of Dick LeBeau, right? And nobody did it right because if you do it wrong, you will get gashed. Mm-hmm. And Dick LeBeau's like, have them copy me. I don't care. And he's like, they can never duplicate what we do. They can try.
What was the difference then?
It was the fine-tuned details of where, so I did an internship with EA Sports, I think while I was still with Pittsburgh. And they were trying to figure out things within the Madden game to have on there. I'm like, you guys are doing this wrong. And at that point it clicked. I'm like, this is what other teams do. They try to see what we're doing on film, and they try to duplicate it, but they don't know the rules as to why the nose guard goes this way.
You didn't tell EA Sports, did you?
I told him they got to make the game go right. I was trying to get a job. No.
But plus, you don't want to misrepresent the Pittsburgh defense.
No,
Come
you
on,
don't.
You guys.
You said the quiet part out loud.
No, it was, but it's awesome. It's the details, and that's what Coach Anderson will bring to that BYU defense. That BYU fans will be able to love about this defense this year.
What jumped off of the page for you from the offensive side of things, Riley? Because obviously, there are a couple things going on. Well, one, if you would have said, hey, in week 2, BYU will actually have their quarterback situation way more figured out than SMU is going to have, because they're going to be playing Preston Stone, but they're also going to be playing Kevin Jennings, and you had Rhett Lashley this week, the head coach for SMU, be like, oh yeah, no, they're both going to see time, and I think that it was, I think it was the SMU reporter we had on yesterday. He goes, yeah, you're likely going to see like a switch off of series too, which I'm like,
he was in tune with it.
And both of them, and both quarterbacks are totally different. And so on the one hand, you go, okay, one brings something totally different, but this is the kind of stuff that I think that you didn't want to have if you were a BYU fan.
You never get a rhythm,
right? So when you have SMU coming in with 2 quarterbacks, Preston Stone and Kevin Jennings, then how do you prepare for that as a defense? I guess knowing both sides of the ball.
Yeah, the reality is, and I think this early in the season, I think that's okay, but you tend to go with what you do best. I mean, it's kind of like what Sly was just talking about. It's that what's part of our DNA? Like, what's that institutional knowledge? Like, what defenses can we run in our sleep? And then you try and dial up, and then you just get a couple variations for whoever's in there. And the reality is, these 2 quarterback things rarely they start to kind of unravel, having been part of one, and which started to unravel in week 2, right? Like in my 2 quarterback thing, we beat Washington, which was a game we were an underdog in. Jake Locker, Washington. They weren't like a juggernaut, but they were a good team.
That was Jan Jorgensen, the block extra point, yes?
Later. This was 2010.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was like This was Jake's senior year. That was Jake's sophomore year.
That was up in Washington.
That was up there.
Mm-hmm.
Ours was here.
Yeah, it was down here.
And then when I say start to unravel, like week 2, we go into Air Force, and halfway through the second quarter, Anai says, because Jake threw a pick and he was 1 for 7. He's like, sit down, and Riley, you got it. And we ended up losing that game because we gave up a BYU record 570 yards rushing, and we only managed 21 points on offense. And then by game 3, we were done. And I had an injury, and the rest is history. So this is game 3 to where this 2 court for SMU. Now, granted, last week wasn't enough of a test to really unravel the 2 quarterback thing, but we're getting into week 3 where as your BYU, you should be licking your chops, because this 2 quarterback thing is going to start to unravel around now in this point in the season. So as a defense, you should be just waiting for that. They're going to create opportunities for you. You have to be disciplined enough. That's why I say you stay in your base stuff. You don't be doing something creative where you have a high chance of you being out of position. You want to stay in your position because they're going to give it to you. It's just a matter of when. And so this should be a great opportunity for Jay Hill and the boys to make a statement on defense.
Speaking of Jay Hill, Mitch Harper just put it up there. It's official. Everyone was assuming this was probably going to be the case, but Jay Hill is in Dallas, and he is going to be calling the defense. I don't know if they said whether or not he was going to be in the booth or not, but he's going to be calling the defenses. And
he'll be in the press box.
There you go.
Against SMU.
All right, so
wow.
And he put a message out there. Earlier this week that things were going well, and loved all the support from Cougar Nation and all. It was one of those things that all 3 programs in the state, too many people know Jay Hill and know who he is, and they know
everybody cares about him.
And he's got so many dang friends. I don't know a lot of people who don't like Jay Hill, and so
we probably all got his number on our phones, right?
Yeah. At some point and by the way, you're also the second or third person this week that goes, oh, by the way, he'll text you right back.
Yeah. I'm like, what are you doing?
I was expecting you to ignore this.
Sarah texts me at least. Jeez.
It was it was a wild week for BYU, obviously, with so much had changed. But obviously, you can't take a lot away from a Week 1 FCS game. But if you can, you obviously saw a lot more output on offense than you had anticipated. Well, certainly that you saw last year. But I think that there was a sigh of relief, at least a little bit.
2 sacks, on pace for 24 sacks. That would be a vast improvement over last season's, 12-game total of 11.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we said the same thing, and it was just like, well, and it wasn't just that; it was how much pressure they were putting on it too, and it was keeping things really unbalanced for them, and it was just guys were making. They were behind the stick so much that game. There were a lot of TFLs. I think there were 7.5, something like that. And it was a good game for the defense.
But SMU's going to land SIU, Southern Illinois, didn't land any punches last week. SMU's going to land punches. Yeah. How do you respond? The old Mike Tyson quote that's way too often quoted, right? I'm not even going to say it because everybody knows it.
Is it too often? I think that's a realist statement. I would say that as an affirmation in the morning. Everybody got a plan until you get hit in the face.
Until you get punched in the face.
Get punched in the face.
Well, here's a guy that's going to punch BYU in the face tonight. It's R.J. Maryland.
Oh, gosh.
Russell Maryland.
So we were talking about him yesterday.
When I say Nevada lost the game, the decision to put him one-on-one, like, come on.
What are you doing? He's been killing you all game.
Yeah.
I love how distressed that makes Riley about this. What were you doing? A week 0 game.
So I think
in Reno,
in Reno
on CBS Sports, me and only like
that's why
Jeremy in the betting booth too.
I was going to say that's week 0. That's some week 0 stuff right there, where we're just like so freaking desperate for football. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got tons more to break down before we get you into that BYU game that starts at 5:00, and we'll of course be continuing on with our coverage of Football Friday and jump into a lot of Utah for next hour as well. So stay with us. It's the Cougar pregame show right here, 97.5 EKSL Sports Zone.
Hello.
It's a Friday, and we're talking football non-stop. All football, all the time. This is another edition of Football Friday with JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
He's got a brilliant mind when it comes to football. This guy knows how the game works. He's got a great relationship with Gus Malzahn, and so like you see where his coaching tree comes from and what he's done as a player and what he's done as a coach and a play caller. So I'm a football junkie, so I like guys that are really good coaches, and I study them, but more than anything is I admire what he does. And then when I meet him in person and I see like, man, this is a really good dude, and you know, we just have to compete against each other this week. But man, he is a great human being, great family, and I think he's doing a great job leading that SMU team.
Oh, gosh dang it.
Right when we go live.
Of course.
Riley
Nelson's on X, everybody. Yeah, the AI images that were conjured up after last night's
amazing.
Patrick Mahomes.
What a start to the NFL.
I'm telling you, the amount of like all the people who came out of the woodwork and gave you all of the conspiracy theories on what's going on. I mean, look, it's a tough. Those are two really good teams. That's why I love the NFL. Yeah. Like that was a fun game. It was fun to watch.
The ending was awesome. Yeah.
Well, I was glad that the Ravens made something out of it, because it was one that I was wanting to see. Obviously, you know that it got close. Hey, this is a good place. This is a good time to start to fire up the
he was waiting for you to talk. That's what it was.
All during break, peace and quiet.
Well, no, but by the way, there's 1,000 yards of open grass that need to be trimmed over that way.
Let's do it right next to the
Let's do it right next to the booth. It's fine. All right.
It's Friday night. He wants to have a weekend.
I know. Hey, look, Cougar pregame show. We're firing up here talking about BYU versus SMU. What do you think about the run game? Obviously, L.J. Martin and Hinckley Ropati basically did a full half split. I mean, you saw Hinckley with almost all the work being done. It's become a joke at this point now, right?
Yeah, he keeps looking back too. He's like, hey, are they still talking?
You can't trim that's the track. There's no grass on it. All right, so no, but obviously BYU with 180 yards of offense was one of those days that they'd like to see. They were glad that they had the result that they did, but. Are we here? I can't. I don't know why. I'm trying to be pro about this. I don't know what's going on. No, but after it was all said and done, BYU's offensive line, they felt like they got the push. Connor Pay this week when we chatted with him, our weekly discussion, he said, hey, this is what we know we can do. Was there a big change in that run game? Not just for these two, but do you have a number one, an RB1? Is it supposed to be L.J. Martin? Because they said he wasn't dinged up, and he wasn't, because he got a lot of work. But they split the reps almost equally, I think, between 16 carries and 16 carries. It was pretty much Ropati in the first half and L.J. Martin in the second half, and they both ended up basically with the same amount of yards.
I think there's plenty of examples. You guys have your own opinions. I think there's plenty of examples. Different college football teams that they've had a 1-2 punch, or like a thunder and a lightning, or whatever you want to call it.
You just don't want the four running back situation up at Utah, though.
Right? But there's plenty of room for two backs to get enough carries to be effective and have an impact on the game. The key is,
it's not
as long as you have
flopping quarterbacks.
Exactly. Because a lot of the running backs are going to do the same thing, but in a different ways, right? But as long as your offensive line is getting the job done, it doesn't really matter who's back there as long as they're productive and they're talented. That's the key. And that's what I think the biggest concern was with BYU was that offensive line going to clean things up from last year enough under TJ Woods to be able to do what they need to do offensively, especially at the Power 4 level. We got that answer against Southern Illinois, kind of. I think we really are going to get an answer tonight.
I think true RB1s, like a Jamal Williams, like a Zach Moss.
Yeah.
Like a couple
Harvey
recent examples.
yeah.
And BYU had a good stress. And by the way, it's probably more easily to be accomplished at a G5 level. But I mean, I just think about Jamal. He showed up. He was super young for his grade. Showed up as a 17-year-old. Never hurt his freshman year. The only time he ever missed a game was like messing with the rules and regulations down. Getting caught up in some of that stuff at BYU. He never missed it for injury. Oh, and by the way, in the NFL, largely injury free, and he's going on I think his 9th year or something. So.
That's a long time for a running back.
Yeah,
for real.
He's having a really nice
Now,
NFL
granted,
career.
he's transitioned from a guy who's got carries to now he's a protection specialist. So and kind of a screen guy. But regardless, he doesn't miss games due to injury. And so those are, I guess what I'm saying is they're truly once in a generation guys. You look at Rapati, you look at LJ Martin. Rapati has dealt with bigger injuries, like kept him out for multiple games or even missed seasons. And LJ Martin, his first season last year as a true freshman, he's a true freshman. Dealing with nicks and cuts. I think the jury's still out on whether or not he's a guy who's going to deal perpetually with nicks and cuts, or his body will develop to being a true bell cow running back. But so I like the run game, at least as far as the ball carriers go. You can't expect to have a Jamal Williams year in, year out. It just doesn't happen. And you might point to programs like Wisconsin or whatever that you think had that, but it really wasn't the backs. It was the fact that their offensive line, they were able to put an offensive line unit out there that no matter who was carrying the ball behind was going to stay relatively healthy because they just weren't exposed out on their own. So I was pleased with it. I do think LJ is probably your more complete back, the back that you put in bigger spots. But I liked what I saw out of Hinckley, and run game's fine. They didn't have to lean on it. I'm interested to see how that run game does when they need to go to it. When the passing game, they can't find rhythm. They're getting pressed. They're getting pressure. Retzlaff's rattled, and they got to go to that run game to establish some stability and rhythm in the offense to see how it performs under those circumstances.
BYU and SMU kicking off here in the next 10 minutes or so. I did want to ask you about because DJ Williams did have 121 yards rushing. A couple of them, the bigger ones, were on kind of busted up plays, or really the coverage was there, and he is not a good throwing quarterback, and he probably leaned on that a little bit more. But does that concern you at all when you watch that, or do you look at it and go, well, I don't think that they were anticipating that they were going to get – that was the thing they pointed out is how much they were, quote-unquote, gashed by that team, which obviously they only gave up 260 yards or something like that of offense.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the best defensive minds, and I'll pass it over to Sly for this, but they are just like take away their whatever they're trying to do, whatever their favorite thing to do, whatever their top target is, take it away, and let them have fun with something else. Going into that game, they didn't think that QB run was going to.
Right. I don't think people thought that was going to
no one
happen.
was like, oh, that's what's going to beat us. And so they took away what they wanted to do. They took away what they planned to do. And it happened to emerge that the guy had a nice day on the stat sheet, but it didn't hurt you on the scoreboard. And so good for him, but ultimately you won the war.
Yeah, and for me, and that's a big part of the experience factor, right, and the technique and what you're learning from. The DJ Williams plays, I feel like it were chunks. He has 15 carries for 120-plus yards. That's, north of 8 yards a carry. And so with that, you just understand, like, when that happens in this style of defense, that was just somebody not handling their technique properly. Right, and so with that, those are things that could possibly be fixed, with the right personnel, with people just making sure they're paying attention to the right thing. And with this defense, it's so hard, right? Because there's times where up front in the front seven, you got to sacrifice yourself so somebody else makes the play, right? The weak side linebacker, the strong safety in this defense always eventually makes the play. They're normally the people who lead the team in stats at the end of the year. But, like, those guys up front really sacrifice themselves so for the good of the team, and that's where the plays are being made. So once these guys understand that concept, understand that, that this is a team thing and we're not always going to have, the stats at the end of the day, because that's what will kill your defense is if I go play outside of the framework of the defense. And so those things will be cleaned up, I think, in these next couple weeks, and hopefully this week against Kevin Jennings and his offense.
Do you remember the old Chappelle Show skit, Wrap It Up?
Oh, yeah.
Wrap it up, B. Wrap it up, B.
This is Wes Jordan's version of playing Sly off of the stage at the Oscars.
Are they saying we're done with the BYU hour?
We're going to turn on some big hair bands and get the slide to wrap it up here. All right.
So frustrated.
BYU versus SMU, that's going to kick off right now. We're going to continue on with our Football Fridays. We're going to preview a lot next hour. Utah, of course, welcoming into town the Baylor Bears, and we're going to also jam a little bit more on Utah State and USC. So stay right here. More to go. BYU kicks off. Be sure to stay around for the post game. As soon as the game wraps, you're going to get the post game. Jake Hatch and myself will chop it up on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We'll be back. More to go. Like I said, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.